relationship. So, and healing and people and loving on people. So I'm just going to go ahead and start at chapter 1. We've got about 45 chapters. They're pretty quick. And I want to see if anybody can fall in love with it, because I am presently writing the sequel to this. But you can get it on Amazon if you want to. You can go look on my site. I guess I should have popped up a thing, but I don't even know how to pop up all this stuff. Yes. Happy day. So chapter 1 starts out, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, which is 1 Samuel 15 and 23. That is straight out of the King James Version. Chapter 1 is called Sista and Mamadi. Rebellion is not the goal, but rebellion finds the hollow places and whispers, follow me. I don't know a soul yet that hasn't fallen for the lie. In southern Mississippi, the flowers are just as confused as the people about which season Mother Nature has in mind at any given moment. So well after the groundhog saw its shadow in 1991, Jypsy Hyman, now this is Gypsy with a G, title of the book is Gypsy with a J. You'll find that out too. Gypsy Hyman, that's giving her Jewish roots there. That's her last name. Okay, we're going to get into all this stuff. I want you guys to grab hold of this. There's a purpose in every sentence. Furrowed her brows when she spotted the white and yellow plumes. As she breathed it and wondered if her mind first or her actual sense of smell that registered the sweet honeysuckle scent. She sighed as the aroma embraced her from the inside out. She pressed her lips together and remembered how the flowers were each pregnant with a single drop of honey. Thankfully, it wasn't her just having gotten her monthly and all. Quotes, so strange, makes you wonder what's in the milk, her mother would say. Seems earlier and earlier with you girls. Silence and solitude welcomed her, and she rested for a moment its grip. Each pebble, every stone's press against her bony, bare feet caused her to flinch. She enjoyed the pain, or at least the ability to feel. She hated shoes. A tear welled up and she reached to catch the black as it passed over her thick mascara. She slung the tear, knowing the moment was fleeting as concrete. Unlike the honeysuckle scent, the sweet smell of anything in her life never lingered long enough to take her mind off the constant anxiety. I guess I should kind of hold this like this. Her head dropped as she strained, and her heart resurfaced, along with the nagging stomach acid that continually burned. She pressed her hand against her jutting ribs, embracing the rumble in her tummy. Gypsy sighed as the darkness of her eyelids soothed the discomfort. She dipped down, grabbing a rock, opened her eyes, and threw it hard against a tree. She must stay busy. She hated the way her mind wandered to his rough hands, his smothering breath, and the voice that seemed to change a child into a woman overnight. An angry, bitter woman who wanted to hide from the world, just like her mother. She shook her head at the thought. She forced her 11-year-old mind to fill with adventure, maybe perspective, drawing from art class, bubblegum, pop, splinter pain in her always bare feet. The cold, clear creek beds worked for a moment to distract her, but not as well as the deep parts of the woods. The tall, strong trees gave her a sense of freedom, and the low, thick brush a covering in a solitude that seemed to protect her from the confinement of the constant disappointment she felt from everyone. An unending battle raged between the thoughts that she purposefully inserted into her tormented mind and the thoughts that rose out of nowhere. Being on foot meant she was not bound to anything or anyone. For a moment, she was free. Looking at her battered, mud-stained feet, she sighed from the throb in her stubbed, bloodied toes. Home. I've got to get home, she blurted out. She felt the ache in her fingers and her toe joints as she wrestled with the chain-link fence that seemed to separate those with stuff from those without stuff. She smiled at the challenge. The metal seemed alive, as if it were trying to throw her off. Bouncing her weight backwards, she grinned, knowing that by refusing to walk the sidewalk or street, she was causing herself more of a struggle. The excitement of the unknown and the torture of the task was all she knew, but brilliance and ignorance ran a fine line. Her thick hair swished, nodding in agreement with the thought. Jypsy knew she was welcomed by those on the other side, those without stuff. Even with the appearance of having a lot of stuff, she identified with everyone without stuff much better. Well, almost everyone. A tiny flicker of calm graced the plywood and sheet metal homes guarded by chickens and goats and filled with love. Always strange to her how beadboard and aluminum suddenly flowed into brick and shingles in the middle-class neighborhoods and just one street over. Even odder were her muddy footprints atop the tall, strong walls guarding the old southern mansions. Just to the west. Her curiosity took her to places that most either feared to tread or didn't even know existed. Thinking of bouncing from a yard full of laundry lines, rusted tire rims, and clucking chickens to butlers serving chicken cacciatore on silver platters made her laugh. Every time her deep chuckle emerged, an embarrassment rose inside of her because the sound just didn't match her delicate, feminine appearance. She wondered for a moment why the economy was not a graceful blend, but instead a quick jolt with no rhyme or reason. She welcomed the conundrum. Jypsy's lungs expanded as she pulled in the thick summer heat that had already settled in her little town. Even April felt like July here, where full seasons were lacking. Thankfully, most of her friends lived just past the chain link fence. She wondered if the privilege of wealth made it difficult for some to understand aching hearts. As Jypsy jumped off the metal bar, she realized looking around that her destitute friends could relate to her pain, even if it was a different kind of pain. "Jypsy, my pale sister." Jypsy shrugged her shoulders, smiling at her best friend's satire. Ellie Demoni was like a diamond that sparkled life into her soul. Jypsy looked up and noticed Ellie standing with her shoulders squared, tall and lean. As Ellie smiled, her high cheekbones popped out of her beautiful, flawless milk chocolate skin. Ellie was always kept, pressed and proper. Jypsy sighed, looking down at her dirty bare feet. Jypsy's mind ran wild. At times, she spun inside, mentally racing to catch the thoughts. Jypsy looked away from Ellie. As much as she loved Ellie, Ellie made her feel even more weird. Jypsy stared at a patch of clovers and thought about how she always felt so different. She had a gift. Whether it was from God or Satan, she hadn't a clue. But it scared her. Too many times, she had visions. And then within days or months, they would come to pass. In fact, only 2 people in the whole town recognized her gift. One was Lilith Alva, the other town weirdo. And the other was Ellie's mom, Miss Demoni, a.k.a. Mama D. A robust woman, so full of love that you felt warm before she even spoke. And from the minute Jypsy's feet hit mud in Mama D's yard, she felt at ease. "Jypsy, you gonna stand there, staring at our grass?" Ellie's voice was patient, and Jypsy knew she could only ignore her for a moment. Jypsy wondered how crazy it was that Lilith, whom she spent all her time with, Lilith, a word in her town most were terrified to utter. Jypsy felt her face squinch up at the thought of spending so much of her time with a witch. Lilith was tall and gangly and a pale woman with beady black eyes. Her frizzy black hair made her appear electrocuted. But why do I spend all my time with a crackling woman? A woman whose best friend is a black cat in a garden full of strange herbs. A woman who is avoided by most of the town. A woman most call a witch. Her thoughts melded into reality as she noticed that her best friend had given up and was now washing clothes in an old ring barrel washer as Mama D shucked corn, tossing the husks right out in the front yard, quickly gaining the attention of the goats. Mama D's eyes lifted towards Jypsy, her spirit glowing and glistening like a shooting star, warming Jypsy's heart. Mama D preferred to be called anything other than Demoni. The name was too much for her. She didn't like proper anything, and not to mention some of the kids from the more well-to-do areas called Ellie Baloney instead of Ellie Demoni. So Mama D shortened everything up real tight and left them mean old poets no room for error. Jypsy chuckled, remembering Mama telling her that the D in her case unfortunately stood for none instead of just D. She always said, "Ain't got the money, but I got the Lord, and He's all I need." Then she followed with some biblical or a Jesus quote about God owning all the cattle on the hill. So all her needs were taken care of somehow. Jypsy was not sure what she meant because she had never seen cattle traded for a car or anything for that matter. But one thing was for sure, Mama D was always happy. But it was a weird happy, deep and contagious and consistent. My Ellie and my Mama D out working with the crickets tonight. Jypsy sighed, knowing that regardless of all the pain and fear in her life, there was an anchor for her here. She smiled, not knowing what to do with the calm rest in her heart. Jypsy clenched the grass with her toes, fending off the monster of guilt that always ran with those uninvited feelings. Dizzy again with the thoughts of what was to come, and always hearing air escape her nostrils just as her chest decompressed. "Hey, Jypsy child, you out too late for only knowing 11 years. You want some fixins?" Miss Demoni's southern voice was full up with long words strung out like a form of sedation that calmed her hearers. Then she would share what was God had deposited deep within her heart. Her words were weighty and actually left her mouth with a blast of comfort, full of goodness, every one of them. Mama D spoke power. "No thanks. Got a project. My parents are wanting me home." She knew as the words left her tongue that her mom didn't care. She was hoping Dad wasn't home. Just the thoughts of her father being there made her stomach quiver. As much as she wanted to stay, her feet stuck to the grass, she knew it was best to beat Dad home. Jypsy ran up to Mama D, breathing in the smells of cornbread and lye soap, nestling in her soft pillow-like embrace. She felt Ellie's scrawny arms around her waist, or what was left protruding from Mama D's embrace. "That's enough," she said, wishing she could help Ellie and visit with her Mama D. After receiving hugs and kisses, she turned and jumped off the wooden porch into the wet grass, noticing that during the hug, the sun had made its last drop, taking with it all of its guiding light. Jypsy fought off the chill of the mud. "I love you both." Jypsy swallowed hard. "How about we all go to the Easter egg hunt tomorrow, Mama D's last attempt?" "I don't do childish nonsense." "No need for the attitude." "We'll be there if you want to join us. Love you more, child." Jypsy had cleared the yard and knew the truth in Ellie's mom's words, and she jumped onto another chain-link fence. Jypsy shook her head at the consistency in the wrestle with the fence. She crossed the drainage easement, separating the neighborhoods. The water ebbed around her thighs, and then new splinters from the thicket prickled into her feet before she finally arrived back on the street. Jypsy's fingers curled and her muscles slowly began to shake. The deep breath helped her stomach muscles draw in. She wished for a warm dinner and a healthy parent's arms to surround her. Gritting her teeth, she shook off the fantasy. She pulled in another breath of fresh air, her stomach muscles tense, and her fingers met the cold metal doorknob. Her hand shook as she turned it and slowly pushed to avoid the squeak. Chapter 1 is over. We are moving on to Chapter 2. Seduced at birth. Despite her attempt to quietly enter, the door filled her ears with the familiar creaks and squeaks. She tiptoed across the wood floor, feeling the sting of the splinters as they pushed further into her flesh. Her toe hit the base of the steps. "Jypsy, is that you?" His voice made her insides shake from a deep place that stole her breath. Her head immediately went down, chin tight to chest. She pulled in as much air as possible. "Yes, sir," she said as her eyes closed, waiting. Her hand trembled on the banister. "You had dinner?" Solomon asked. Her stomach roared. "I'm good. Lots of homework to do." She knew she excused herself with this regularly. For 11, she was thinner than most in her classroom. She waited, hanging by a thread, to see if he was going to leave her alone. When there was no reply, she exhaled and opened her eyes, stepping up to the first riser in the silence. She looked side to side and then stepped again, each step bringing her more and more relief. The back of her legs ached as she took the opportunity to skip steps, propelling herself into her bedroom. She gently shut the door behind her and fell onto the bed, where each night she cried herself to sleep. Her eyes flew open, stinging as the blinding light bulb cracked the darkness. She knew only too well the one reason that the light should be switched on in the middle of the night: to wake her before putting her back into complete darkness. In 3 steps, in less than a second, her father crossed the room. Her already bruised arm ached as he jerked her towards him. "Mom's tired," her father whisper drew out the tear that burned as it hit her cheek. Her pain shifted from a drop in her stomach to a stabbing ache in her heart. She knew only too well what was coming. She refused to go numb. His bitter, alcohol-ridden breath burned her nostrils. She pressed her face to the side as far as it would go. Rage, almost like her soul was on fire at his violation, shredded her soul. She didn't understand the pain at all. So much was being stolen and wounded. But a thundering sound echoed through her mind all the while. Finally, the door slammed. She stood, her unsteady legs shaking. She pulled her clothes back on, turned the light off, and fought the dizziness and a deep, raging moan from being released from her mouth. She knew how long broken bones took to heal. She exhaled for what felt like the first time since he had entered the room. She lay back down, wrapping herself in a protective ball deep under the covers. Jypsy pressed hard on her lower stomach and sobbed herself to sleep. the next morning. The 8 hours she slept could have been 80, and it still would not have been enough. Her mother hollered from downstairs, "Jypsy, it's Easter! We can't be late!" Jypsy sat in Mass that morning, remembering the last time they went. She saw her mother's cigarette-stained fingers shaking and wondered how many hours she had gone without alcohol, and so that she didn't give herself away to God with her breath. She was worried that her eyes would get stuck facing the back of her head from rolling them so hard at the thought. Jypsy winched her mouth to the side, eyes blinking, and sighed, reaching out to steady her mother's cold, shaking hand. Last Easter made it a whole year since she had seen the angels. Thank you, Nicole. Her heart raced as she looked around for them. Her mind spun as it replayed the memories, almost like she was watching an old cartoon reel from the 60s. With their wingspan and all the eyes, the angels were nothing like the Hallmark statues embossed with endearing statements. These were magnificent, and they did not scare her. They warned her about the pain, but they told her about the purpose of the pain and the healing that would eventually come. Total disbelief in the latter two. They resounded with echoes through her soul, beckoning her to accept healing, but Jypsy was too battered, too bruised, too hopeless. Her soul was signed, burnt up, or it was hiding in order to let loose a raging fire, pressed down so deep it ached all the time. Because of the gift, they told her she would think differently. She would see things. Her mind would run wild, and she would move from present to reality to past, a dreamlike state in the daytime back to reality. No one understood her. But she didn't understand that everyone's minds didn't race. She would be present, and then she would be miles away, years away in her mind. She would see things before they happened and remember too much, too often. She would always tell people she was listening, but they always called her a daydreamer and yelled for her to pay attention. Her mind was her own worst enemy. It was the only way she knew how to think. It was like buckshot, and everyone hated her for it. Her lack of being present, they would say. They would always say. Everyone would. She loved how the stained glass dripped colors onto her skin, masking the bruises that would show when she sat shifting her skirt. Her flickering movie reel of a brain annoyed her when she felt fear, but it would always chase random ideas. And for that break from terror, she was thankful. She dropped her head and noticed her kneecaps protruded too far. Keeping tears at bay, she realized this year was not too different, just worse than she was 7, 8, 9, 10. She looked up into the wooden rafters and then scanned the entire chapel. As she did, an old chanting hymn droned from the pulpit, following the Eucharist prayer. She closed her eyes over and over again, hoping to see the angels as the priests began to read. The Epistle of St. Paul to the Hebrews, 13, 1 through 3 from the Vulgate. Craterus fraternus, mantine hospitalis notile avis parentan, literum quandrum adlius hospices respitem metamorte ventorum taquantem ventilerum. Gypsy rolled her eyes at the nonsense. No one in this town gets that Latin stuff. This place for sure ain't Rome. The deep harmonic voice continued, translating into English. Let love of the brethren continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to the strangers, for by this some have entertained angels. Without knowing it, remember the prisoners, as though in prison with them, and those who are ill-treated, since you, yourself, also are in the body. Seriously, God? You are telling me about the angels through that guy? So where did mine go? And prisoners? I am one. Where are you? She looked around the pews. No way these people are angels. I know every one of them. Nope, not these people. Why aren't you here? And why don't you stop him? Terrified, Gypsy kept opening and closing her eyes, trying and trying to find them. They were gone. Chapter 3, The Dream Catcher. I'll probably stop after chapter 3 unless you guys want me to keep going. James was not happy, as usual, and looking for something or someone to bear the burden for him. His nose itched and his skin crawled. His armpits rushed with sweat. He felt the anger well up from his belly and pour out his mouth. They are the worst. The ache in his hand throbbed, his vision blurred, and the room appeared tilted. He slammed the phone back down on the desk, sending several tools rattling to the oil-stained floor. This garage is a freaking mess. Brian shut off the air compressor and moved in front of the Chevy without looking at him. You've been working here all of high school. Never thought to clean it up yourself? James knew Brian was placating his outburst. The garage felt ingrained in him, the only safe place of part of his life for so many years. The smells, the sounds beckoned him, adding more fury to his warranted exodus. James smirked. Why are you going to ignore me? Aside from a jab or two, especially the rudeness on my last day here? I hear it every day, James. Enough. Go snort something up your nose. And please quiet yourself. Your family is jacked up as the mafia. You're always angry. You use people. You owe me thousands of dollars. And now you're all of a sudden leaving town. Brian began backing up, shaking his head. Where this unexpected attack was coming from, James had no idea. They'd worked together for years and often got on each other's nerves, but it was clear Brian had reached his limit of him. Maybe. He'd always felt that way. And finally was letting it out now that James was leaving. You're obnoxious, James said. I've had enough. Brian just nodded. Go get a fix. Obviously you need your fix. He rolled his eyes. I'm leaving because I'm tired of people like you. leaving would be the best thing for you because your family's going to try to kill you if you don't kill them first. Brian's voice was sharp. Try and find you some sober folk that are a bit less crazy in the head. James lunged forward, feeling his arm muscles tighten and his hands form into fists. He wanted Brian to feel the pressure as he loomed over him. Don't make me out to be some crazy drug addict. James looked down, drew all the air in he could, and shook it off. So any plans to pay me back before you're gone? Brian kicked the spare tire James had just removed from the old Jeep. I have no choice. The oil spot blurred as James' anger rose. He could see Brian roll his eyes. Just forget it. You owe too much money to too many people. I'll never see it. James raised one side of his mouth, lips tight, wanting to punch Brian in the face for his disrespect. You bet. James barely smiled, feeling empowered. It's literally impossible for you to feel. Literally no compassion ever. None. It's never your fault or your responsibility. It's like you're a psycho. Brian turned his back. Hey, Brian, in order to know that something is what it appears, you have to know the opposite, right? James' head stung as he slapped Brian's back. What are you referring to? I'm referring to you. You're the problem. You're the one that's crazy. And you know it. James hit Brian's back again, telling him goodbye, knowing he had hit him too hard. For some reason, and just in this moment, James was able to squint his way out of his own madness. I will pray this will change your life. However, you really seem beyond help. Brian looked down and to the right. James knew that Brian was glad he was leaving. He always talked about James, his family, saying that evil was seared into their blood. James nodded, walked just a few steps out of the garage bay towards the road, hesitating at the edge. Good times working with you. All these years, Brian. I'll be back sometime. I'll be back to see you. He felt his arm tighten as he lifted it and waved, his chest aching to slam Brian to the ground. He couldn't hear Brian's response echoing through the aluminum room. His mind raced, every thought raw. But then, right on time, the knowing, a sort of strange numbness, would always make its way into his mind. He knew deep down that he was different, not at all like any of his family. Where am I going? His stomach ached and churned, though not because he left his friends, his crazy family, his life, and all the memories behind. He knew why. James shook his head, still wanting to kill Brian. He was not a psycho. Brian was. But deep, deep down, he knew his own twisting evil and felt infected by it. Somehow, it felt cavernous within, but he didn't care. The fear would resurface when he was weak. He had to stay strong, keep moving forward, racing through his mind, spinning. His hands brushed through the rough fabric of his jean pocket as he pulled out his bag of weed. The ache soothed with the crack of the lighter. He felt his lip curl up. Do I even really care? I never hurt anyone. James exhaled. His words strained and raspy, followed by a deep cough, and he inhaled again. Chapter 4, Hangover and Out of This Town. I'm going to read one more chapter, if you guys are all right with that. We're not even at an hour yet. Why do I always end up hungover and half intoxicated, still staying with strange men? Other than Lilith's, my home is this raunchy hotel. Jypsy's breath escaped slowly as she tried to keep her voice down. She looked into the mirror as the warm sliver of light peeped through the drapes and highlighted her face, forcing more guilt on her from looking much older than 18. She saw a single tear turn black and drop to her lower lid, then streak across her pale skin. She sat in silence and just watched her breath moving her chest up and down as more tears fell from her blackened eyes. Her mind wandered. The 18 candles dancing on my cake that Ellie made for me yesterday, and saying goodbye to Uncle Ken. This is all too much. Her eyes burned, so she imagined the candles dancing as her eyes closed. 1 Corinthians 6:16. Jypsy's eyes flew open as the strange man in the bed rolled over, repeating 1 Corinthians 6:16 in a deep whisper, followed by sudden silence. Is this dude a pastor or something? She rolled her aching eyes. Wouldn't be a surprise at this point. Drunk. Everything. Even her reflection became a blur. Spinning, nauseous, she stood and paced the floors, hoping the movement would remove the feeling of vomiting. But it only worsened the feeling. So she lowered herself to the floor and prayed she would fall asleep. God, help me. I can't stop. Uncle Ken told me you would answer me. The foolish horoscope, hope, witchcraft is not working. I'm drowning, falling, spinning. God, I want to stop. Softly the words came, so as not to wake the strange man sleeping in the hotel bed. She felt the pain pressing nearly all of her breath out of her body. Feeling nauseous and dizzy, she knelt down and passed out on the floor. A thud like a hammer knocking on a metal door shook her awake. Maid service, 11 a.m. checkout. The accent was thick, beautiful, and far off, almost indiscernible, but just clear enough to take her to a foreign land in her mind for a second. Thud. Maid service! Maid service, 11 o'clock. Ignoring the man that she just met at the bar, she slipped on her clothes, lit and inhaled the snap, crackle, puff of her smoky breakfast, and opened the door. Her stomach ached, feeling exposure even before the maid caught sight of her. Refusing to make eye contact with the maid, she squinted out of the blackness and into the light. The maid doesn't know anything. Her thoughts didn't help. Sorry, she said, almost burning the black and white uniformed lady as she jumped out of the way of Jypsy's half-inch ash hanging off the end of her cigarette. Sorry, so sorry. She exited backwards, spinning around to make her escape. Someone's still in there. Jypsy bent, dodging her brooms and pressing her words towards the woman, each word softer than the first. "All back soon. You call, check out?" Struggling to release English through her thick accent, the maid made a check sign in the air, pushing her cart down the hallway. Jypsy shook her head and whispered, "I ain't about to tell anyone about anything." She exhaled the smoke that swam through her lungs, savored the soothing feelings. "I am not only leaving this hotel, I am leaving this town. I can't stop the pain." Her stomach was sour from guilt and poison. As it bubbled up, trying to escape, she peeled her tongue from the roof of her mouth and sucked in the smoke. Nodding at the false calm, she swung her head back and exhaled. The guilt penetrated deeper, regardless of the distance between her and the inappropriate companion. Her plan was to go straight home, pack, revisit the pill bottle for some lasting peace, barefoot again. She shook her head and endured the half-mile walk home. Entering her own house was like jumping off a tall building. Jypsy opened, eyes wide, took a deep breath, turned the handle, and scanned the garage. Her father's car was gone. So much for telling him goodbye. Her eyes shot upward and quickly leveled again. Whatever. Only the vintage Mercedes was left. She shook her head and kept moving, uneasy and unsure of her mom's condition. Always assuming the worst. Jypsy made her way through the dimly lit house, taking deep breaths, trying to remember the scent of her childhood home and overcome the inability to breathe that she knew too well. Jypsy sighed as she met the squeaky hinge, catching her stunning yet shallow, frail face in the flash of her mother's medicine cabinet. I've never had to get a script. Just open the door and take. The sound of the hinge would stay with her forever. The supply was endless. And not a pill was ever counted. What am I going to do now to get drugs? She hadn't previously considered that kind of fear. Been through utter ruin. And I'm worried about a pharmacy. At 18, I'm taking more pills than my mom. She shut the door, seeing the panic in both eyes, encircled by a purplish black. Her face was an ashen yellow, her neck thin and flanked by protruding collarbones, covered in places by greasy black hair. Jypsy shut her eyes, ran the water, tipped her head to the side, and down. She felt the cold drip down her neck as she swallowed the broken, jagged pill that left a toxic taste on her tongue. Leaving fully stocked. Jypsy realized that she was moving way too fast, dumping most of each bottle into a jewelry case, while making sure that there was still provision for her mother. Expanding her lungs to pull in air and attempt to slow down, she felt like she was pushing against an unmovable wall. The unknown kept pushing back against her. She began to search her house for Patsy. "Mom," she whispered as she entered each room. Dad had left her alone for several years now. But she did not like encounters with him at all. Jypsy let out a groan. He was gone, and still she was quiet and creeping. Jypsy shook her head, wondering how much time and how much space she would need before she quit tiptoeing. before his presence was not every shadow she would encounter. Mom? Nothing. No answer. Mom? She finally found her asleep on the couch, cigarette burning in hand. A tear streamed down her cheek as she extinguished the smoke and kissed her mother on the head, taking in her smell and locking the moment in her memory. She tried to keep the weeping to a minimum, but her stomach churned more as she began to gag on the pain. She wanted her mother to heal, to live, to smile. She dropped her weight onto her mother, and she woke for a moment. A moan came out of Jypsy's mouth that felt like it shook all of Hades. Another and another. Jypsy, you okay? Patsy mumbled and then was gone, drifting back into the drugs. A small part of her voice reminded Jypsy of her mother's comforting tone she used when she was little. And Jypsy slid off the couch from the embrace, what felt like a corpse, and onto her knees. The prickle of the old antique rug was nothing compared to the deep, deep pain that came pouring out of her heart and her soul. God, it hurt. It hurts. No, Mom. We're missing something. Maybe I can go find it. And I'll bring it back to you. Stuttering, whispering while the tears gushed, she kissed Patsy on the forehead, took her box of smokes, and stood. I'm so sorry. I took so much from you. I'm thankful I could at least bear some of your burden. I love you. As she parted, her mother, her insides were twisting, and something within her fell upside down. Whoever's up there, please protect and help my mom. She almost tripped, queasy from the tears. Her hangover kept her numb enough to leave, and her vision blurred as she made her way to the garage. Where are you? Can't you see this crazy mess? Jypsy felt her suffering flip to anger. She looked back to her mother and then glared at the oil painting of the three of them over the couch. Is that a family? Is that a marriage? Seriously, that disaster warranted being chronicled in an actual oil painting? Goodbye, Solomon. Jypsy reached for the keys, but accidentally also grabbed the holder from the wall, along with a chunk of sheetrock, and screamed, flinching, as something tore her hand. One of the points of her star keychain had cut through her flesh, and the blood reminded her of the vision she had seen at Lilith's. Then she heard a voice. My morning star. It is his blood you need. Strange. What in the world? I need blood? Whose blood? I've bled enough for a lifetime. There was no one in the garage. But perhaps an eerie something and a gust of wind. Not a bad something, but something. She felt like she had felt when the angels were there. All right, guys, we are at chapter 5, The Enigma of Divine Convergence. So I'm going to stop there. This has been Jypsy. It is out at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If anyone has questions for me, please ask. But I'm going to try to do this, normally teaching Bible studies. This book that is radically tough to listen to right now, it is all going to come together somehow. But I do hope you guys will stick with me and listen to it or get it and read it. But I have no problem getting up here and reading this to you guys because there's a lot of explanation and a lot of depth biblically and different things that are going on. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the first 5 chapters. I've got it on the new bulletin board thingy on TikTok. As to when I will read again, I didn't think we would get 5 chapters in, so I'm glad. We could probably go pretty fast. There's only 45 chapters, and I'm writing the sequel to this. Hey, Peter. Anyway, if you missed any part of this so far, Jypsy, which is entitled Jypsy with a J, but her name is Jypsy with a G right now. So we'll get to that. Biblically based Christian psychological thriller. So Jypsy was 11 at the beginning of the book.